Now, nothing is original, okay? So you can steal from anywhere. Now, originality is non-existent, so don't bother trying to conceal your thievery. You can celebrate it, you know, if you feel like it.
Whether you love them or hate them, movies and TV shows are often full of references, parodies, and homages to other works. You're probably thinking of some right now.
What do you like to drink?
I'm a fiend for mojitos.
How fast does that go?
Goes very fast.
Yes, hello. The password is Go Fast Boats Mojito, all one word. Yeah, Go Fast Boats and then Mojito, all one word.
Sometimes these influences may be more overt.
Basically, in the Great Train Robbery, they commit this great robbery, and then at the end, the police get them all, and somebody in the last shot fires a gun right into the camera. That's why I have Joe Pesci firing the gun at the end of Goodfellas.
Sometimes they can be rather vague.
The funny thing is, like, some of my favorite filmmakers, like John Cassavetes, you wouldn't necessarily see that influence on the surface, but obviously there's, you know, a lot more going on, you know, subconsciously.
References can truly come from anywhere, so let's go beyond the purely visual and explore the more nuanced ways filmmakers can pay homage. Films can often oscillate somewhere between straight-up adaptation and heightened intertextuality. Think Clueless's modern retelling of Emma.
Ew! Get off of me! Ugh, as if!
Or how The Lion King mirrors Hamlet, which Shakespeare lifted from Norse legend that Robert Eggers based his 2022 film The Northman on. More recently, you have Anyone But You riffing off Much Ado About Nothing, which, well, this list is literally endless.
Big time! I'm big time, okay?
Horror in particular abounds with these intertextual riffs, and there's something so satisfying about seeing these nods of acknowledgement. In his 1981 film The Evil Dead, Sam Raimi playfully taunts Wes Craven by including a torn poster from Craven's The Hills Have Eyes in the background. Craven's response? Showing The Evil Dead on a TV screen in A Nightmare on Elm Street, which Raimi then addressed by hiding Freddy Krueger's glove in Evil Dead 2. Tarantino is a master of these intertextual references.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Drawing inspiration from genres ranging from Hong Kong action films
Put our guns down and let's settle this the fucking conversation.
to martial arts films. From war films
100 Nazi scalps.
to filmmakers from the French New Wave. You can see how Fellini's 8.5 inspired Pulp Fiction's famous dance scene. Only Tarantino maintains that he was referencing Godard's Band of Outsiders. Which, now watching it, actually bears a striking resemblance to this. And while you can't talk about homages and dance scenes without mentioning this amazing Flashdance number. But back to Tarantino. I think this highlights the way homages are often multifactorial. Movies are more than just the sum of their visuals, because filmmaking is an amalgamation of many things from which one can be inspired by. There's music, which can get used over and over and over and over again, or a score that just means a lot to the filmmakers.
Welcome to Jurassic Park.
Oh my God.
So we had a music supervisor who kind of like was the middleman, and she had us write a letter to John Williams, saying like, "Dear John Williams, we're both named Daniel and we love the Jurassic Park theme song." And then we just tried to kind of thematically explain how important the song was in the film. Be like, this is like used to explain to an amnesiac what it feels like to like remember home. Like it's kind of like a hopeful, beautiful moment.
I remember I was in my hotel room and I just heard like the Jurassic Park theme song from outside my door, and then like everyone was like knocking on my door waiting to like announce.
It was me and the producer John, and we had like a jam box, and we were just like, like
we got the song. John Williams said yes.
Sometimes there's a piece of score that evokes fear so well you decide to riff off it again. Composer Johan Johansson drew inspiration from John Williams' classic 1975 score for Jaws when creating the relentlessly percussive soundscape for 2015's Sicario.
Nothing will happen here. If they try anything, it won't be at the border.
Hair and makeup can also serve as a source of inspiration.
Who did your makeup?
We went for something dramatic. Do you like it?
You look like a badger.
How do you make someone's makeup look like a badger? I mean, how far do we go with this? Basically what happened was that I sort of established the courtiers, the makeup on the women first, with these black bands across their eyes, these white faces and black bands across their eyes, which is, I've said this now, I think enough time has passed, it's a slight homage to Blade Runner as well, because I love it. This sort of band, and the idea is that the Queen has copied a female courtier that she's seen, and but it's done quite badly and quite crudely and something a bit sort of quite childlike about it.
What do you think you look like? Badger.
Donna, the most recent work we've done together is Donna, and I say to Chris Storer, what do you think Donna's hair looks like? And he sent me this picture in a text that said, I think that's kind of beautiful.
Sometimes a character in one film can stand in direct reference to another.
Gertie! Rotate the pod, please, Hal.
Filmmakers can even pay homage with the rhythm of a cut.
For me, it often is many different things. It could be a line of dialogue, it could be a location, it could be a color of some article of clothing, just a moment from life.
For 2019's Marriage Story, Noah Baumbach drew inspiration from a scene in Martin Scorsese's 2016 film Silence that was technically a mistake.
It was the eye line. I wanted the eye line to each person, so Rodrigo looked at me and said, well, that means we're going to have to go, because the two priests are here and the bishop is there, or the cardinal, whatever. And
so you jumped the line on.
Yeah, but
well, you
I
go from Monsignor to Monsignor.
Oh, yeah. I went from
It'd be like
Monsignor.
Lulu's left shoulder and my right shoulder to Stephen.
And we were cutting it together, Thelma and I. She looked at me and says, this is crazy. I said, I don't know. Yeah, let's do it the other way. We looked at the other way. She says, terrible. Go back the other way.
Oh, wow.
And we got back to the mistakes.
And I lifted that mistake. In Marriage Story, I do this a few times.
So we're over Adam's shoulder here to the judge, and then we go over Nicole's shoulder. In a sense, it almost looks like a mistake. Now we're over her shoulder to the judge, so we're going from the judge to the judge, so we're just staying on him. It really aligned them. It keeps telling that story of Charlie and Nicole and keeping it in their perspective.
It's so much about perspective and about who are we with. And so when they're talking in the very beginning of the movie to the mediator, I go, I do that exact thing.
You asked him if it was intentional.
But I had a feeling it felt in the best way, like kind of something, a mistake that worked. Because you could have always cut through him. I mean, there would be always a way you didn't have to.
I had two cameras. I could have done the other. I tried it the other way. It wasn't interesting.
That he denounced God in public and surrendered the faith, and is now living as a Japanese.
Many of the critiques around such homages come from how blatant some of these cinematic influences may be.
The most detestable habit in all modern cinema is the homage. I don't want to see another goddamn homage in anybody's movie. Don't be marinated. Don't soak yourself in films.
For some, the references are just far too obvious and take them right out of the film. But let's push back on this notion, because great moments of cinematic brilliance can truly be found in the least suspecting of corners.
Hello, ladies. Look at your man. Now back to me. Now back at your man. Now back to me.
I really love those Old Spice commercials. And I actually talked to the director, and I was like, and how did you do that? And he was like, we did it 116 times. And it was kind of amazing. And I was like, well, I probably won't have that much time.
Being open to all kinds of cinema, just be open to it. I would have friends who would get angry. I said, no, just try to go with it. It opens up a whole world. You know, it could be light years different from what I do, but I don't care.
I never use mine. I'm conservative, you know.
Oh, this is a shot I always had fun with. I always like that scene in One or Two Things I Know About Her, a Godard picture in which she looks at a coffee cup and he kind of moves into the top of the cup and into the coffee, and the bubbles in the coffee give the impression of space,
Milky Way almost. This is a New York version.
And you also have a very omnivorous appetite for film. I don't think you're elitist in any way, and I love that you will mention Hammer horror movies in the same breath as Powell and Pressburger, or Mario Bava in the same breath as Max Ophuls.
For me, I had no prejudice, or not prejudice is the wrong word, but I had no expectations. In those days, too, you just went to the movies. And we weren't necessarily told, now, this is a special film. This you have to really pay attention, sort of like eat your spinach, you know.
You're just going to the
movies. We were just going to the movies.
You see, sometimes soaking yourself in cinema, as Wells says, isn't such a bad thing after all. What can ultimately come from this is something truly brilliant. For a film like The Worst Person in the World, which doesn't slot easily into one genre or another, pulling inspiration from numerous places can be beneficial, and this film has quite a few. From the playfulness of Singing in the Rain to the poignancy of Annie Hall.
Alvy, let's never break up again.
The existentialism of Antonioni.
Io vado, Riccardo.
Devi andare da qualche parte.
Mixed with the levity of Q-Core.
Oh, dear, is there no such thing as privacy anymore?
Only in bed, Mother, and not always there.
But what about Transformers 2?
One of the films I remember being very moved by is Transformers 2.
When discussing his own filmic inspirations, Joachim Trier noted how Transformers 2, yes, that Transformers 2, left him feeling moved.
It's kind of beautiful and weirdly Tarkovskian when they're fighting out in those birch woods. And, so I still love all kinds of movies. I still watch everything. I think that there are some films, and they're easy to talk about intellectually, and they're not always the films that give me the rush of cinematic brilliancy. I think sometimes movies that are quite mainstream can do something with the camera and space and movement that, to me, reminds me of my primary fascination for cinema. You could see it in Tarkovsky and Kubrick, but you can also see it sometimes in a musical or in an action film, just the movement of something.
I am wondering if somehow that scene... the death of a transformer somehow wormed its way, subtly into some later film you made.
Yeah, well, who knows?
Okay, so maybe this film doesn't instantly scream Michael Bay, but inspiration, that rush, can come from literally anywhere. It's how you end up with a film that you think you have a hold of. A love story. But then, with the flip of a switch, it becomes something else entirely. From a broad range of influences, Trier ends up with something that completely evades classification. And this genre-bending impulse comes from another seminal cinematic experience.
The production company that I run with Eskil Vogt, my co-writer, is called Don't Look Now, and it's kind of a homage to Nicholas Roeg.
The work of Nicholas Roeg could have inspired an entire video in and of itself, and there's truly no shortage of directors who have been inspired by his films. Take the fractured narrative of Memento.
Do I lie to myself to be happy?
Christopher Nolan has stated that this film would have been pretty unthinkable without Roeg, citing his structural innovation as having a large influence on him. And he's far from alone.
Yes, yeah. But for me, he's the filmmaker's Picasso, really.
There are hundreds of movies that I love, but I did say, Don't Look Now. See that?
Don't Look Now is another one that's like that is a genre film that's kind of genre, but or a lot of, it's a classic that people draw from all the time now.
Find me anyone who doesn't think the opening of Don't Look Now is up there with the finest work British cinema ever produced.
Take it easy.
No, but it is astonishing.
It combines some unusual things. On one hand, it's a very nuanced, naturalistic drama in terms of the performance and the way it's shot.
Santa!
On the other hand, it's a pure formalist experiment. Basically, what is cinema? It's playing with time and space, and Roeg's the master of both.
We tend to believe in the familiar. We tend to say that's the definite.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's where we run into serious trouble. Time definitely has a linear sense to it, and I don't believe it.
But perhaps there is one scene that has been particularly influential for its creative use of editing. cinema prudes, you may want to avert your eyes.
If you don't know Don't Look Now, you might have already heard, though, that it has the best sex scene in all of cinematic history.
The premise is simple enough. A couple, played by Julie Christie and Donald Sutherland, make love before getting dressed for dinner reservations that they made earlier in the scene.
Signore, you will be eating here tonight, I hope.
No, thank you, Senor Alexander. We're going to eat out tonight.
But that's not how this scene is cut.
He cut it together by none of it is voyeuristic. It just reminds you of having made love yourself. And the way that he did that was he never stayed on the lovers. You were there, then they were getting dressed. You were there, then you were getting dressed. And it's intercut like that all the time, and it saved it. And the only reason why it's good is because it lives in people's memory, as opposed to being something that you watch and think, oh, God.
In this fractured representation of time, Rogue reaches something more honest. There's a sincerity in the cutting that is somehow more emotional, and it's a scene that would see its echo over 25 years later.
Another story of me stealing something, or trying to steal something.
I'm Gary.
I'm Celeste. It takes forever to get a drink around here. There's only one waitress. No.
In a direct homage to Rogue, we get this cross-cutting. A meeting at a bar is intercut with a later scene in a hotel room.
That was the kind of effect that I wanted, that it made emotional sense. It was tracking the emotion of the scene, but it didn't make any literal sense.
More recently, this associative edit found its manifestation in Maggie Gyllenhaal's The Lost Daughter.
I don't want to bother you, but if you like octopus, this was literally swimming an hour ago.
And Fonzie and I had been talking about Don't Look Now, and I was like, Fonz, why don't we cut the octopus stuff like the sex scene in Don't Look Now?
You have a lemon?
What both Soderbergh and Gyllenhaal understood was the emotion inherent in the juxtaposition.
It was like this beautiful, almost magical sequence.
And this points to the interesting role structure can play in these intertextual relationships between films. Take the Technicolor melodramas of Douglas Sirk, where lurking just beneath their sentimental veneers is something much deeper.
All you have to do is turn that dial, and you have all the company you want, right there on the screen. Drama, comedy, life's parade at your fingertips.
Countless filmmakers have taken his cue of concealing sharp social critiques within their narratives. Perhaps most recognizable among them is Todd Haynes' 2002 film Far From Heaven, where the intertextual relationship to the melodramas of Douglas Sirk, most notably All That Heaven Allows, are apparent. But maybe less appreciated are the other cinematic parallels that proliferate Haynes' work.
Folk music is just a word, that I can't use anymore.
From elements of Fellini's 8.5 to a key plot device in Lean's Brief Encounter.
I felt the touch of his hand on my shoulder for a moment.
One of the very first films I thought of when I read the first draft of the script was A Brief Encounter. So for people who know, it begins in that refreshment stand in a train station. Mm-hmm. And then in the background, you see two people having a conversation. Yep. And then a loudmouth friend interrupts the conversation. You realize an important conversation has been interrupted. And this brief encounter is played out twice, one at the beginning and one at the end. But you return to that scene and come full circle and understand what this very important conversation was that was interrupted.
I stood there trembling right on the edge. But I couldn't. I wasn't brave enough.
So I thought, oh wow, that's such a beautiful structuring device, because then you travel through the entirety of the narrative to explain what that conversation was about, what we missed.
You two have a wonderful night.
What's significant about these examples of homage is how they expand on the works that inspired them, which brings me to a bigger point.
I mean, we're all standing on somebody's shoulders. I think the key is whose shoulders are those.
And I think it's fun to kind of play with moments that inspire you or take inspiration from things that you love.
But the scene was inspired also by Alice in the Cities, where you see them exercising together.
Sometimes a filmmaker's influences will be more subconscious, and these intertextual relationships between films will not always be readily visible.
By the time I'm making a movie,
I don't really know where I'm stealing everything from. And, you know, and someone says to me, I can see the thing you do here, and I'm like, oh yeah, that is where I stole that.
Jiminy Cricket, he flew the coop.
Drawing inspiration in this way, whether consciously or not, does not make a work derivative or unoriginal. Because there are ultimately many ways to tell the same story.
Where's Elle?
Expression in any form I've said this a lot, but for me it's like waves in the ocean that you can't really delineate, but they overlap. And I don't really believe in originality because there are a limited number of stories, but there's an unlimited number of ways to tell them. It is only theft if you take somebody's idea before they've realized it and say it was your own. And then you're just a full-on asshole. But if you take something that moved you, that exists, and you quote it or you imitate it or you make another version, I think that's just beautiful. I think that's the nature of creating things.
Yeah. So back to this. Being soaked in cinema is not necessarily a bad thing. Wells even does admit that most directors who are can still be great filmmakers.
The argument against what I'm saying is that the world is full. All the best young directors are soaked in films.
Alors, cinématographie.
And they have managed to rise above that and to be remarkable cineasts.
Claiming a work is derivative or unoriginal solely because it features references or pays homage to another work ignores the way in which creative ideas, rather than occurring in a vacuum, build off what has come before them. These arguments against homage and in favor of pure originality not only miss this,
from now on it'll be 50 push-ups each morning,
but confuse inspiration for imitation.
That's the hype! Newest, latest. Let me tell you the story of right hand, left hand. It's a tale of good and evil. Hate.
H-A-T-E. It was with this left hand that old brother Cain struck the blow that laid his brother low.
Love. These 5 fingers, they go straight to the soul of man.
So I said, let's put love and hate on each one of these rings. And then I just borrowed that speech from the movie.
Ultimately, there are many things to be inspired by.
You have to let me go.
From paintings to photography to nature. And film history isn't necessarily a bad place to start.
There's no greater school of cinema than film history. I'm talking about film history from Lumière and Méliès.
All the movie brats learned from the masters of the 40s and 50s and 30s, and I'm sure those in the 50s and 40s learned from the silent movie masters. And so we're all handing influences down and inspiring from generation to generation.
I mean, and it's such a pleasure. I just invite you guys to really go and revisit or visit for the first time and learn about all these great masters since the early days. Because sometimes you think that you're doing something so original to realize that in the 1920s it was already done many times. And it's amazing to see the amazing development of film language throughout the years, you know, because it challenges you.